Welcome to Lesson Learned, a conversation about MythCraft. I am Corey Griffin,
I'm Joey Hosmer.
and today we're going to be talking about magic in MythCraft, continuing the series. This time we're going to talk about some specific rules when it comes to arcane, occult, and psionic casting.
All three of my favorites, particularly out of this list, though, Occult is my favorite.
I'm very torn on these three. My absolute favorite's not even on this list, but I like each one for different things.
Yeah.
Um, I think Arcane has some of the best defensive magic in, maybe not the best, probably the best like utility and support in the game. Um, Occult has some of the best debuffing in MythCraft.
Yep.
And Psionic is the reason I had to counter what I was saying about the best defenses.
Yeah.
Because Psionic has some of the best defensive magic in its entirety. However, this episode we're not going to be going over spells and ranking spells and stuff like that. That might be a future couple of videos where we just rank arcane magic as an entire video.
Videos.
Yeah. Those will be some long videos. They might get multi-pieced out, if we're being honest. But yeah. So like I said, we're going to be just going over the basic rules, right? So let's go ahead and go alphabetical and start with arcane. Arcane magic kind of originates, at least in like core MythCraft lore and everything. Arcane magic originates from the fundamental wellspring, and accessing this directly is extremely dangerous. People that try to do so that aren't like carefully studying and training, it would be impossible for everyone but like the most powerful or maybe the most lucky would be caster. In order to use arcane magic, you have to achieve a state of like metaphysical awareness called attunation. Attonation. While the actual use of arcane magic generally requires diligent study, intelligence, and careful process, the ability to use it at all requires one to be open to the fundamental wellspring through this attonation. And then there's some basic things that is very... They are rules that only happen with arcane things. So, an arcane, one of which being a focus. An arcane caster generally has a physical object on their person that acts as some form of mental focus for their attonation. If this object is destroyed, they can recreate it given a week of downtime. This might be like a spell book, maybe a gem, a crystal, maybe a flute, or like a hammer or something, some other meaningful or sentimental item. As far as like Larissa goes, because Larissa has arcane magic in our podcast, Tales of Yvard. What is Larissa's focus?
So if you have listened to the podcast and have been introduced to Larissa, she has used a small hand dulcimer to cast a couple different spells. She does regard that as her focus because it's something extremely sentimental to her. and she can kind of disassociate when she's playing it and kind of focus on it and playing to channel her magic into it and through it.
And for my character, Melozog Shava in MythCraft Legends, he uses the book of monsters that he is writing as his focus. Melozog's manuscript, as it were, for his focus. Another thing that's super important when it comes to arcane casting is intent. Arcane magic kind of operates through the intent of the caster directly and not through a proxy. The act of using arcane magic is an attempt to change reality itself for a benefit for the caster. For example, one caster might prefer their well-worn spell book with pages dog-eared and bits highlighted, while another one might want almost an unused quality spell book, like pristine. That being said, for a cantrip like Mend, the second option, if they were to use Mend, would make it look pristine, right? Where someone, the first, may cast the same cantrip, using Mend for the example, to restore all of the love and affection that they see on their thing. Mechanically, it's still fixing whatever happened. Probably like a torn page or whatever.
But ultimately, it looks different to each person.
Right. Like their intent is more important than mechanically fixed. Right. That Arcane has a lot of utility in it that has some less than descriptive words, I'll describe it as. And intent just kind of says, hey, use whatever flavor fits for your character. For those examples. Right. Another, probably one of my favorite things about arcane casting has to be backlash. Arcane magic, you draw it directly from the fundamental wellspring, and inherently it is volatile. When you roll a 1 when casting a arcane spell or an arcane cantrip, the magic automatically fails and you take damage equal to its spell point cost for a minimum of 1. This damage immediately ends your turn and you do not carry over any AP, and as such cannot act reactively until the end of your next turn. If you take backlash damage that exceeds your character level, you may make a luck check. On a roll of 10 or higher, you only take damage equal to your character level. If you don't have your focus when you cast arcane magic, you then trigger backlash on a 1 or a 2 and take 3 times the damage after accounting for your character level, if relevant.
Which can turn into a big yikes.
I'm almost picturing, imagine rolling a 1 on Meteor.
Oh.
Imagine rolling a 1 on fucking Meteor Swarm.
Oh.
150 damage, and you die.
Yep.
Though, because we have some detriments when we roll a 1, we also get arcane critical casts. If you crit on an arcane spell, you reduce the spell point cost by 10. If the spell costs fewer than 10 spell points, you then expend no spell points.
Yep.
What's a really good spell for that? Contest spell.
Yeah.
Depending on what you're contesting. Snowball would actually be a really good one for that. Frostbeam would be another one.
We don't need no not fire spells in here.
Nova would be another good one. Pretty much all of the damage spells would get even more utility out of them, because then if you have the action points, you just cast it again.
Yep.
It didn't cost the SP. It is absolutely fun in that retrospect, right? I love it. I love the fact that while we have a penalty, we also get a boon. But I also tend to not use arcane spells that require me to roll.
Yeah. There's a lot of good give and take. A lot of high risk, high reward kind of deal.
Right. Without it being crazy high risk and crazy high reward, like we'll get to soon. This is just blanket high risk, high reward.
Yeah.
Now, specific to arcane, we do have some magic types that are specific to it. This is cantrips, and which are no spell point cost, that you can use them as many times as you wish. So I'm thinking Beam of Fire comes to mind. I'm thinking, which, I mean, at high level, Beam of Fire becomes a nightmare.
Don't I know it?
Yeah. I'm thinking, yes. Yes, those are both the damage ones, for sure. But, yeah, I was trying to think of Frostbite. Yeah, Frostbite. Yeah. Right. Oh. Right. Um, one thing that was a lot of fun for me to play with around recently, and it was kind of recently that I started playing with this, was Ulcerate. It only does 1d4 necrotic damage, but it makes a creature take one fewer action point, or one fewer action, or has one fewer AP on their turn. Which, sure, it's got a pretty high action point cost, but you can lower that over time.
Yeah. And then imagine, what like everybody in the podcast is prone to do, where we have somebody prone and grappled, and so then they now have to take an action to stand up, and then now they're at -1 action because of ulcerate. Like it's
absolutely brutal.
huh. Huh.
I see the brain working. Maybe I shouldn't have brought up ulcerate. But MythCraft is a game of combining as many things as you can as possible, and when you add things like ulcerate or enchant weapon or fire shield, you start changing the way the battles look. Um, or something like raise bone spider or raise revenant or raise skeleton. Every time you use arcane magic, you change the way things look.
So, especially with the different summons, as Corey just brought up, Larissa is, as we've seen, big on those. Um, and I mean, I have effectively turned a turned one character into somewhat four characters, because we have or because she has summoned who she summoned right now. uh, I have a lot of different things I can do, whether it's in combat stuff, out of combat stuff. I They can be a decoy, they can be, they can use themselves to bar a door closed. I mean, there's an endless amount of possibilities that I could use for these. And so that goes as far to say that, when there's four players, there's really seven. And then to go even further to say, Larissa isn't the only one that summons things. So I mean, yeah, when you start, bringing in a bunch of different stuff, it very much alters how things are going to happen, how things are going to go forward, and especially in your MC's brain or Corey's brain in particular. I'm sure he's had to think about these things like, all right, well, now I need to make this a little bit more difficult, but I don't necessarily want to make it a harder challenge by giving them more creatures or an overpowered creature or anything like that. What
Oh,
can
I
I
do.
do? Well, yeah, that's the easy way to go about it.
But I'll also give challenges that
Yeah,
perhaps the summons are best to deal with. I'm thinking of a particular episode where most of your summons didn't even get into the fight; they were taking care of other things.
yeah. Well,
Um,
they were attempting to take care of
they
other
were trying.
things.
They were definitely trying to.
Yeah,
Um, that being said, though, like uh, it's one of those things where are, if I really want to super balance it, I could just add the monster level into the calculations when I calculate up a encounter on how strong that's supposed to be, or I'd give it resistances that your summons are going to struggle to overcome that are less not as hard for players to overcome because they have bigger bonuses, but it's harder to hit with the summons. Or I throw some minions down and we have a minion war and a main war go on, and there's a lot of ways that you can interact with minions. Okay. If you don't target minions, then minions become less effective, in my opinion. If I don't target minions, the minions are not stopping damage that would have went to the party. They just aren't as good than if just because if every time a skeleton ran up on a person, they then ran away from the skeleton to go hit Larissa,
yeah.
right? I don't do that. I've never intentionally disengaged from a summon to go mess someone else up.
Yeah, I mean, and as far as the realm of, within the story itself, uh, Larissa has disguised her minions. So at a fancy glance, a normal person isn't going to see them as just a minion. They're going to
Yeah,
see them as an additional threat.
yeah, absolutely right. I was just like kind of speaking off the top of my head of like if people are struggling because, oh, this person always brings minions to every fight. Okay, I understand that that's a struggle. There are a few things you can do. I just named like 3 of them.
Yeah.
You know, without doing the one that I would find personally offensive, which is my summons never get targeted. They are always given free reign of the battlefield to do whatever they want, and the MC ignores them other than, they're doing damage. At least that's my opinion, right? Now, because a lot of my, if you listen to the podcast, maybe I don't spend as many turns hacking at them, but that's because I get fucking surrounded and then I just go to whoever did the most damage.
Or teleport away.
Or teleport away. Right. It's just the way it is. In my opinion, going by things like if you have multiple targets that someone can target, maybe I play a little meta and don't always target the weakest one, which I mean a skeleton or Shiro.
That's kind of rude. It's funny though. It's also true. I can't argue with it. I mean, it's rude, but I can't argue with it because it's true. It's funny. Dude's like a wet paper napkin.
Right, but yeah, he does have like high defenses. So if I can overcome those defenses, I can take him out of the fight fast. Where skeleton, not as high a defense, more hit points. Which one do I go for?
There's no way he has less hit points than a skeleton. Skeletons have 18 hit points.
Okay, no, yeah, he does have more.
It's not much more though.
He does have more, but also makes a lot more attacks.
Yeah, well, he also tends to hold all of his AP over that he can. So he starts with 12.
Fun pugilist times. Yeah. Anyway, back to arcane magic. We're going to talk about a couple tags that are specific to arcane magic. These tags are references in various arcane spells and arcane cantrips and abilities and quite a few other places sometimes as well. You have arcane power. Arcane power is just the total number of talent points that you have spent on arcane magic talents as a result of leveling up, as well as the number of talents that you have spent in certain classes or subclass tracks. These classes or subclass tracks will specify that they contribute to your arcane power. Another one that you get is arcane ritual. If you know a spell with the arcane ritual tag, you may scribe that spell into a book by spending at least 1 hour doing so. Spells recorded in this way can be cast without expending spell points if the spell point cost does not exceed your maximum spell points. This requires the spell's full casting time plus 10 minutes. And you get to cast you can cast 1 arcane spell per day in this way, regardless of how many arcane rituals you know.
Which comes important for Larissa.
A slight bit of information here. You can upcharge arcane rituals. However, you do have to pay the upcharge cost. Upcharging is not free. Only the base casting of the spell is free. We've gotten some recent information on that.
Remind me that when the next time we record and Larissa is on deck, because I'm going to forget that, and that's actually going to come in handy.
The last tag that we're going to have to talk about is going to be fundamental. Spells with the fundamental tag can only be dispelled using the unravel magic spell from the arcane source. Nothing else.
I like that. Some arcane on arcane violence, if you will.
So the next one that we're going to talk about, and hopefully we don't get as distracted as we did in Arcane. But the next one we're going to talk about is, as Joey has said, his favorite, and is one of my favorite debuffs. It's going to be Occult.
So with Occult, a lot of it has to do with rituals and careful experimentations. Typically, occult casters can augment their essence by pulling essence directly from planar entities. Now, that being said, there's some drawback because it is very dangerous. If the entities were to become aware of the theft or use of their magic or use of their essence, they can definitely become some powerful enemies. And if they do notice, the power becomes the cultist to do. And if they don't notice, that power is used for the cultist to do with as they see fit. The augmentation of one's essence through tapping into the essence of others is the heart of occult source. Now, there is a toll. The draw of occultism is great. By manipulating one's own essence, one's own soul, a caster is beholden to nobody but themselves. But this extremely individualism comes with dire threat. It is easy to overreach. A caster might lose themselves to dark rituals. Becoming so focused on altering their soul, they become unrecognizable to who they were before. Alternatively, one might draw so much power from an extraplanar entity that that entity becomes aware and attempts to siphon the power of the occult user. Generally, these powerful beings will not retaliate beyond causing a spell, ritual, or chant to backfire, but occasionally a greater power or a greater being might use its power to hold a grudge against the caster and try to force it into their service. There's a few different ways to go about occultism. There's different physical tells, some being individualized, and the casters train themselves with wildly unique outward gestures, verbal recitations, or other expressions of magical casting. But generally, occult magic involves some amount of stomping, clapping, or verbalizing, usually mixed with drawing glyphs, geometric designs, and the like on parchments or in the air. Some occult casters prefer to seek out mentorship from experienced occultists in an effort to mitigate the possible negative effects. Two of these organizations in particular are especially noteworthy, though there are many, many others. Occult groups are usually small, regional, or secretive organizations, but the two that we're talking about are the Savants of the Pale and the Path of Ascendancy. Those are widely known international organizations.
Yeah. So the Savants of the Pale, like, they're focusing on the mystical myths of the Pale. They learn how to like hide and obscure their tracks. They believe that this is of fundamental importance because once they become expert at hiding their magical presence, they can steal even more powerful abilities from gods or other planar beings and perhaps escape undetected, free to use their newfound powers however they please. Casters from this group are notable for wearing like deep hooded cloaks and for casting occult magic by singing strange, almost discordant choral melodies. the Path of Ascendancy, which is probably my favorite way to play a occult caster. Um, they are the best known school of occult, and they profess to anyone, or they profess that anyone can become a god in their own right if they try hard enough and are willing to sacrifice enough. One of the requirements for new initiates of this path to advance in rank is for them to bring in additional new initiates, right? You get to move up if you bring in 2 people.
Hmm.
Ascendants tend to cast their magic by drawing intricate, almost beautifully complex geometric shapes, and they might even have these like tattooed on themselves somewhere. The Great Ascendant is the leader of the path. Although once human, he has undergone so many permanent transformations that he now almost resembles something like an archfiend. He has goat legs, huge claws, cat eyes, ram horns, a snake's tongue and fangs, like enormous bat wings. Every inch of his once human flesh has been burned and branded and inked so many times that it's as tough as like leather and as red as raw meat. His skin, like I said, his skin is absolutely covered in those geometric tattoos that are just never quite symmetrical. That last line gives me the ick.
Just because they're not symmetrical. Canonically speaking, Larissa's horns are now not symmetrical.
Okay, she's about to lose a horn.
One curls a little bit more than the other does.
One's about to get chopped off. So the relationship with divinity. Occult casters often steal powers from divine beings, but do not confuse this with divine magic. While divine casters might carefully negotiate contracts with patron deities, or are rewarded for like devout worship with magical favors, occult casters have no form of covenant with deities from whom they draw power. Yeah. Divine casters might find it challenging to draw power from multiple gods, if the 2 gods don't necessarily get along with one another. But an occult caster has no such inhibitions, as the gods themselves are often unaware of the slivers of powers that an occultist steals. So the types of occult magic, we have occult spells, but in addition to occult spells, we have rituals, which take quite a long time to cast, and each ritual will specify how frequently you can cast it. And then we also have chants, which are 0 SP, and you can use them as many times as you wish. Some of my favorite Drums of the War God.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely top notch.
Blind.
Also top notch.
Grasp of Bones.
It's almost like somebody we know has all 3 of those.
It's almost like I helped you put it together.
Almost.
I did.
In addition to the different magic types, there are some specific occult tags. Just like arcane, there is occult power, which is the total number of talent points you have spent using occult magic talents as a result of leveling up, in addition to the number of talent points you've spent in certain class or tracks. Again, like we said, just like arcane. There's also curses and charms. These will denote an effect that lingers with its targets for the magic's duration, even if an effect would normally dispel or suppress magic. We also have... Go ahead.
Just being able to work through magic suppression is super strong.
Yeah. There's also incantations. If a spell has the incantation tag, the spell's effect can be extended if you spend a smaller amount of AP on subsequent rounds. But these spells do have a maximum duration. If you neglect to spend the required incantation AP on any of the subsequent turns, the spell ends and you'll have to spend the beginning SP again to recast if you want to renew the effect. This might look like something that says incantation, and in parentheses will have 1 AP, max of 10 minutes. This means you can initially cast the spell, and then you can spend 1 AP on subsequent turns to keep the spell going. Up to, in this particular example, a maximum of 10 minutes, and then it would expire. Like Grasp of Bones is a good example of that. It costs you 3 AP and 12 SP to start, and then on subsequent turns after that, it has, I believe, it's 2 AP, if I'm not mistaken, to continue incanting it. I just had it up.
I don't have it up.
Where's that? Where's that?
Yeah, it is 2 AP.
Yeah. Yeah. So 3 to start, and then 2 for a max of 10 minutes.
And then the last one, which is probably one of my favorite things in the occult, is Dark Power. Dark Power is attached to certain chants, rituals, and spells. These magical abilities come with risk of being temporarily or permanently altered or corrupted in some way, specified within each ability. For those of you that have watched MythCraft Legends, you've seen me blind myself with Dark Power through both Devil's Sight and Blind.
Oops.
It's just so much fun.
Yeah. I like this one because a lot of the more offensive spells come with a dark power to them. Just like we talked about, Grasp of Bones being one of of our favorite spells. If you proc the dark power on this, it's gonna hurt. The dark power for it starts if you crit fail on an attack from the spell. You yourself take 1d12 necrotic damage as the skeletal hand turns around and attacks you instead. So there's a lot of give and take. It's a great spell, but if you mess up, it's there's some major repercussions. And even worse, there's a lot of other interesting spells that even Larissa uses that can attract certain deities and entities to their location specifically, which causes a lot of damage issues if not taken care of.
Now, I will be honest. If you are an MC and you have someone that wants to use these kinds of spells, perhaps talk to them before they roll Dark Power for the first time, if they're going to have to change a name or whatever. Because honestly, to use our podcast for the example, the Talisman of Rasheen should be the Talisman of Eris. Just like, for example, right?
Just out of curiosity, how do you spell Eris?
Eris.
Cool. So the Talisman of Eris is a wonderful spell to use.
Uh, but again, like if you're gonna have a caster in your game that has any type of play into lore and things like that, know what you're doing. Um, Players, know what you're doing. MCs, look at your players' character sheets and know what they're gonna do. Um, Players don't put things on character sheets if they're not gonna use it. Period. They don't. Um, so if you want to run your own like homebrew world, and you absolutely can with MythCraft.
Oh, yeah.
There's nothing stopping you from doing that. But maybe think about some things. This will definitely be something again I touch on when we start doing some cleric videos about how I homebrewed things for my own personal um, divinity, which is much smaller than the official system. But I still had to find a way to use um, all of the divine icons.
In your own representation.
Right. Um, that being said, do I absolutely love it? Yes, I do. Because you can also almost flesh out your pantheon by grabbing a couple of them together and just being like, what does this look like if you have ambition, wrath, and hedonism for the three tenets of this god? Did you freeze or are you just not moving? Okay.
I just pulled a Drax. Were you asking me that question? Or was that like a rhetorical? Okay, it was a rhetorical question. I was like, was I supposed to answer? Do I move?
No, it's
Do I
kind
just
of
let him go?
uh, it's kind of rhetorical, kind of not. But like that's a great way to think about a pantheon, though.
Yeah.
Grab some of those divine icons and mix and match things, because swap out ambition for nature, you've got a completely different god.
Yeah.
Swap out nature for um, the afterlife, you've got a completely different god. Kept thinking of like death, right?
Yep.
Specifically, there's so much fun that you can build a world around, and we're not even talking about what they gave us to build worlds with. This is looking at character stuff that you can use to build worlds with. I know I geek out about the weirdest shit, but they gave it to us.
Yeah. And that's one of the big things and the big pluses for MythCraft is that it's there's just so much to it. It's almost in itself infinite with what you can do.
Not quite infinite, but it's fucking close.
That's what I'm saying is almost.
Yeah, it's so much fun to sit down and make characters. For the last week or so, I've been helping a group transition from another TTRPG to MythCraft. And once it clicked for them, they loved it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, once it clicked, they're like, this is going to be super powerful. This can go with this, it can go with this. One of which is playing a Curseblade vessel, Curseblade anti-essence vessel.
Okay. Yeah. No. Okay. That's a pretty good combo.
It's an insane combo.
What level?
12.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. That's
Against things that do physical damage, I think he's almost impossible to hit without a crit.
that's pretty awesome.
Um, Especially since and everything has TD, so your rogues and things that get bonuses when you have your rogues, your assassins that would get sneak attack don't get sneak attack because to get up close to you they
Right.
have TD. It's just an amazing build. And as he was putting things together, he's like, "This is just strong. This is just absolutely broken."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how many times have I, put something together and then started putting it in practice, and I'm like, oh, this is actually kind of broken. You know, uh,
Frequently, flame affinity and
uh
fire sword.
flame affinity, fire sword, beam of fire, fireball, 21 AR.
Yeah. Um,
And that character stemmed from one particular lessons learned in and of itself, from the very beginning, where we talked about dragon folk. So you're to blame for that.
I don't care. Um, I don't care. This is all just saying, like, there's so much you can do with occult magic that you're siphoning off the power from someone, right? These things happen. Exactly. These things happen. Um, you're siphoning off the power, and sometimes that has consequences. Sometimes it doesn't. You're gambling on it not having consequences more often than it does. It's a good gamble. At least, in my opinion, it is.
Well, and the cool thing too is there are some ways that you can pad the gamble, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, a great example is Larissa herself. I have a couple different things, that if I happen to roll a dark power, I can change it so it doesn't trigger the dark power.
Yeah.
Theoretically. In
Theoretically.
theory,
Theoretically. As long as you only
there's
do it a couple times a day.
there's about a 1 in 5 chance that, per day, that bites me in the ass. But you know.
Yeah. It's not too bad. So, moving from manipulating your essence through siphoning off the essence of someone else, we're actually going to move into manipulating your very own soul and your own essence by almost a sheer force of will with the psionic casting. So psionic magic draws from the inherent power within one's very own soul, their essence, their own being. Individuals who are sensitive to this power often manifest at a super young age, as long as something traumatic didn't happen that caused them to gain access to it. Although few know how to spot and develop these early signs of psionic latency. A scion, once identified, often enters into the care of a faction. These factions regularly compete with each other to increase their rank. This competition is usually friendly. These factions of scions are generally referred to as wings within their own ranks. Despite having differing goals, their unique nature of being like hyper empath and people with telepathic abilities have resulted in an affinity between them that outshines their connection with people that are not do not have the latent power. Um, it goes on to talk about some of the different groups. Just to name a couple, we have the cabinet, which are a secret council of 12 formidable scions who oversee hundreds of latents. Um, and, advise many kingdoms. Um, you have the light from below. That really they're just dedicated to improving the world. Then you have the fixers that mostly hunt monsters and collect bounties. Those are like the three main ones that you would come to, and a very brief explanation because I'm trying to cut this down for time.
And this is probably one of the longer ones to talk about too.
Yeah, it is. So a few things that I really like about psionic is you get psionic aptitudes. They're unique subcategories of psionic magic. Psionic casters typically focus on one aptitude and greatly increase their power with it. So you have things like clairsentience, which allows a user to masters one senses and proceed outside of those senses and maybe even outside of oneself. Um, then you have like psychokinetics, which is the manipulation and mastery of existing physical matter. And you have like meta creativity, which lets you tap into the space between the pale and draw like shape your essence, manifest like semi-physical objects and maybe even creatures. Another psionic aptitude that you have is telepathy, just mental communication, such as traditional empathy, maybe, or traditional telepathy, maybe things like empathy, mind reading, maybe even like down the darker side of like manipulation of thoughts and perceptions. Um, you also have things like psychometabolics, which is one of my favorites, to be honest with you. It is the ultimate attunement of one's own body and the ability to push it past its limits and even morph it and shape it and change it to do what you want it to do. And the last one, which is my other favorite, psychovillainy, is the forbidden art of charm and compulsion, dominating someone else's will with your own. But specifically to talk about psychovillainy.
Yeah, that's the truth.
um, some psionic abilities are agreed to be unethical as they subvert the free will of other creatures. Such magic is known as psychovillainy. Use of such magic would result in an investigation and perhaps even banishment from one's own psionic wing, depending on the degree of the offense. The latent might be shunned from other wings, leaving them with no choice but to take solace with other scions of their kind. The Syndicate, a secret wing of exiled and banished scions who care for each other and work as mercenaries and sell swords across Ansera. Generally, telepaths probably find themselves the most tempted by the forbidden arts, and many say that telepathy kind of rides that thin line between acceptable and forbidden. As far as like psionic magic types, in addition to spells, psionic casters might also learn invocations. So an invocation, if you know an invocation, you can cast an invocation a number of times equal to your psionic tier. This resets when you take a rest. So some psionic tags, psionic power. So much like occult and arcane, this is just the number of talents that you spent on psionic, or this number of talent points that you've spent on psionic talents as a result of leveling up, along with the amount of talent points you spend in certain classes or class tracks. These classes or tracks will specify when they contribute to psionic power. Psionic tier, we've already heard it once. Your psionic tier increases at varying instruments or increments of psionic power, as shown in the table I'm about to tell you. If you have a psionic power of 1 to 3, you are psionic tier 1. If you have a psionic power of 4 to 7, you're psionic tier 2. If you have a psionic power of 8 to 11, you have psionic tier 3. If you have a psionic power of 12 to 15, you have psionic tier 4. Psionic, not psychic. 16 to 19, you're at 5. At 20 plus, you're at 6. Your psionic tier determines how many times you can use invocations each day. Aptitude. When you take the Adept of the Psionic talent, you choose one aptitude. Clairsentience, psychokinetics, metacreativity, telepathy, or psychometabolics. Concentration. Spells with the concentration tag require a lot of mental focus to keep running. Thus, only one can be active at a time. If you take damage while you're doing this, you must make a concentration check. 1d20 plus your endurance. The DC of this check is half the amount of damage that you took. Manifestations. A spell with the manifestation tag costs 0 SP for scions who have the corresponding aptitude, although upcharging still requires spell points. And the last one that we have is meditation. Psionic spells and invocation with the meditation tag requires for you to meditate for both the casting and the duration of the spell. While meditating, you cannot spend action points to do anything else unless you have talents that specify otherwise. Also, unless you have talents that specify otherwise, you cannot voluntarily end meditation early. Taking damage ends meditation immediately. If your meditation ends early, then the spell or invocation just fails. We covered a lot tonight.
Yep.
And we haven't even really started talking about interactions.
Nope.
We just read the basics. Just going over the basics. That being said, there's a lot of basics. A lot of good basics. A lot of good things in there. When you start thinking about spells that you're going to take, remember the things we talked about here. You know, are things better at a different psionic tier than when you first take it? How much better is one over another? Are you psycho-villainous? or are you not? It also, like, again, I talked a little bit about this in the occult section, um, and I said I'll talk more about it in the cleric section, but the existence of scions makes you think about wings. And if you're building your own world, what do wings look like for you? Um, so far, you all have not experienced Yavard's version of the wings.
But they are there.
They exist. They absolutely exist. Um, I'm not going to answer what that looks like yet, but they absolutely exist. I'd rather that came out in show than in the conversation. Um, when it comes to cults and stuff like that, obviously they exist. To speak about Yavard specifically, most cults tend to either worship Eris or Groth. Not very much in between. It's either magic or the person that hates magic.
Yeah.
That being said, and arcane magic is everywhere because um, I love arcane magic and I love it being spread and used by everyone. Um, with that being said, I've talked a lot in this episode. I know you have as well. Would you mind doing a Baron of Dice ad read while we see if any of our wonderful viewers that are watching right now have any questions?
Sure thing. So just to go with what Corey's saying, one of our sponsors is the Baron of Dice. Baron of Dice is your one-stop shop for premium wargaming and fantasy dice. All of their dice are hand mixed with premium resin and colored dyes, then poured into a silicone mold before being laser engraved with one of many epic symbols. And then lastly, finished in a matte or gloss polish to achieve a near perfect result almost every time. There's no balancing issues, micro bubbles, or mold lines, and I can personally tell you, because I have some floating around on these shelves back here, that they are just epic dice in general. You can get them square cornered or rounded, and they're just really great dice. You can quite literally feel and hear the difference with their dice. And then whether it's wargamings, TTRPGs, or whatever else you're playing, Baron of Dice is there to elevate your game.
Okay. I have another ad read that we're going to do while we gather more questions. I haven't answered to the question that we did get, and we didn't even cover them. But what I'm going to say is we support MythCraft, obviously, right? And we support the creators of MythCraft as well, Quasi-Real Publishing. Quasi-Real Publishing does have a new Kickstarter starting right now called Start the Fire. Start the Fire is an explosive new digital anthology where you get to take on the role of heroes, refugees, lawyers, and common folk struggling to survive under the brutal new regime. Salamoro, the Conqueror, and the assistant to the Empire, or the Emperor. Guys, why do you come up with the weirdest names? Anyway, have taken the world by storm as this person's army surge across the world. Nation after nation falls to its unrelenting cruelty. Desperate heroes launch guerrilla warfare against the mighty empire. Clerics, clergy, and governors with pure intent try to deploy their power, fighting the very system that granted it. And every civilian seeks a shred of hope in a hopeless world. Start the Fire is a 12-episode anthology in 3 acts. This includes 5 adventures for Dungeons and Dragons 5e, 7 adventures for Dungeons and Dragons 5e and MythCraft, 5 standalone games, and 6 short stories. Play in order, maybe start a new game, or pull your favorite out and put it into your own game. Check out Start the Fire. A digital TTRPG anthology. Links are in the episode description. Now, if all the sources duked it out, who do I think would win? Divine. Next question.
I don't even have an argument for that.
Okay. If we're talking about the highest levels of play, right? We're talking everyone has all the big guns in the world that they want to play with. I will play a single card and rip everyone else's magic to shreds. I will cast Miracle. The only magic that exists is Divine. Divine wins.
Checkmate, Jesse.
If we're talking about lower stages of plays where I don't have 150 spell points, right? Divine has not only... So the difference between Psionic's version of Miracle and the actual Miracle spell. And I'm bringing it up because the Psionics is similar, but it is not the same. Okay, so here's the thing that Divine can do that Psionic cannot. Divine can change the past. Psionic cannot. Divine can say Psionic magic never existed, and that becomes reality.
Get owned.
Because you can't, it literally says you can't actively change the past with shape reality. However, with Miracle, you can. Divine can say nothing else exists. Divine wins. At earlier stages in the game, I think Divine still edges out with just, I mean, healing is not everything, damage is not everything, but they can do that. They do healing better than any of the other 4. They do equal damage to the other 4. They don't buff defenses as well as Arcane or Psionic. They have equal debuffing as Occult and Primal. I just feel like if I had to choose one to stand above them all, it's the one that is almost equal to the other 4 and what they're good at. And if we're talking absolute late game, Miracle wins.
Nerd.
Okay, so I'm just going to get into it. This is going to become a thing when we did the next one in this series. But I am going to bring up a thing about divine magic that some people might not think about. Divine magic does not have to be you are a devout person to this divine being. You could have made a deal with them. You could have tricked them into giving you magic. Divine magic just says that there's consent. That's it. To use it in terms of perhaps Dungeons and Dragons terms, both clerics and warlocks would use divine magic. But yeah. No. I can go one for why I said my favorite was not in here. Divine is my favorite. I'm not gonna lie. But you can't kill me as long as I have AP and SP. I'll just, as long as I have AP, not dying. Not dying. Yeah, plus commandment. Plus commandment. Which, I mean, you can do commandment-like things with psychovillainy, but still. Why'd you have to ask me that question, Jesse?
Because it's Jesse. Who else?
But yeah, if all the sources duked it out, I think Divine would win.
ADHD
I could ADHD is going burr right now. I think that it might be a situation where if it was 4-on-1, does Divine win? No. In a free for all, I think Divine wins. Now, absolute late game, Divine will win. Because again, I can rewrite history with Miracle.
I have an idea for a one shot.
Yeah. Now, would I be shaken for the rest of my life and never be able to use Miracle again? Yes, but I have won the debate on what magic is the best. The only one that stands.
And on that note,
yeah. On that note,
before we let Corey continue this rant,
yeah.
Thanks everybody who gave it and watched. Thank you to everybody who participated and asked questions. No, Jesse, no more questions. Okay, what's your question first? Okay. Thanks for everybody for coming by, saying hi, chatting along with us, and just listening to the lessons learned. We do this for any new players who want to learn about it, or maybe even some, a little more advanced players that want just a little more insight. That's why we do it. We've got different guests all the time, and that's what it's all about, is just spreading the knowledge and spreading the love of the game.
Yeah. So I will say thank you all for being here, and I hope that you all have a wonderful week, and we hope to see you next week.
See y'all then.